Hello Internet, welcome back to the Experimental Cataclysm. If you don't know, this is the show where we talk about a lot of the changes that have come to the experimental version of Cataclysm over the last couple of weeks. This week, pretty light show as far as things go. Again, we're in the midst of a feature freeze. There's been some movement towards 0.E, but it looks like that is still a ways away. I keep forgetting to mention that, because we discussed it previously. But yeah, there is movement, but of course it's not out yet, which is fine. It's not a big deal. First up today, also, yes, I have some exciting stuff going on that hopefully will be impacting the channel in the near future. It's a little too early to discuss it, but that's another reason we're going to have a quick show today, is because I have some other things on my plate that I'm hoping are going to shake out for the best. So yeah, pretty brief show. Not a lot to talk about, but we will jump into it. So first up, from David P.W. Brown, we have the ability to auto travel using Autoswim. Now, of course, we have auto travel on the regular map. We pretty recently had him change it so that it also functions on other Z levels. We had a change where you can now auto boat and auto drive, and this seems like the continuation of that. And so the way that this works, it's the same as auto traveling. However, it determines your path a little bit differently. So, for instance, if you select 2 points on the map and you auto travel, you will move from point A to point B. If that destination traverses a river, let's say you have a 3-tile wide bit of water and you path from one shore to the other, it will prompt you on whether or not you want to swim across. Because, of course, low swimming skill can be deadly if you are trying to swim across a wider area. And so it will prompt you, asking you if you're sure that you want to swim across. However, if you choose, let's say we're on the shore and we choose to go into a lake, it will not prompt us, assuming that we know what we're doing because we selected a tile in the middle of a lake. Other than that, it's really not a significant change. I think that swimming is one of those things that is a very rare thing to really need to do in Cataclysm, so I don't know that this is a huge change. Obviously a lot of people were excited about auto driving and whatnot, but I think people will be a little less excited about Autoswim, not to detract from, David P.W. Brown putting in the work. It's just there are more things that happen more frequently than swimming. So pretty minor change, but I wanted to throw it out there. Next, from Curse Twist, we've had a significant number of changes to houses. Mostly this occurs by adding new house layouts, changing the old house layouts, things like that. And here I just grabbed one of the PRs. There have been several PRs that adjust homes and whatnot, and I just grabbed one. As far as I know, I'm not even sure what all is being done to them. I just saw that there were multiple changes. I would imagine that it's primarily, if it's new layouts, that's obvious, obviously a change. But I think the updates to old layouts are primarily adding the single-use storage, which is stuff that we've discussed previously, where it will only spawn items that belong in that particular thing. We've seen that with bookcases. We've seen that with counters in kitchens, things like that. So I'd imagine that is the primary change of some of these updates. Other than that, it looks like new layouts, looks like some changes to old layouts. Pretty simple stuff, but there have been a lot of them, and yeah, I thought it was interesting, anything that fleshes out the world, I don't love big empty rooms, but what are you going to do? This, I assume, is a before and after. Here we have a before picture and an after picture, is what I'm assuming that this is. There's actually no real information about this, but yeah, they look a lot better than they used to. I'd imagine that's what this is. So there's the previous layout, and then here is the updated version. You'll see we have flowers, we have some miscellaneous garbage in the yard, like a bird fountain. It's a much more densely loot populated. It makes a little bit more sense organizationally and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of these changes, think they look pretty good, and just wanted to give a shout out because I know Curse Twist does a lot of the map gen stuff, and we've been seeing some movement there. Similarly, from Curse Twist, we have basically it adds blocks to the game. So instead of spawning individual homes and whatnot, it's adding these, it's a 4x1 city block that consists of both retail and homes. I think it depends on what the layout is, because there was a mention of multiple other ones. They may not have been added yet. So here adds a 4x1 city block consisting of 8 retail/commercial spaces and 8 upper level apartments. So if we look here, this is an example of the commercial space. You'll see that they're much more closely packed than we would normally see things in Cataclysm. Usually there is minimally a 1 tile gap between buildings. And they have a little bit more of a cohesive back area as well, which is what you would see in something like a strip mall. If you're an American, you probably know what a strip mall is. It's usually just a collection of small businesses in a strip somewhere. And then, that's about it, small offices and whatnot. And it looks like there is a stairs outside leading to the apartments upstairs, which makes perfect sense. I've known people who live in housing like that. And currently, so basically we talked about nested chunks previously, but I believe that that's what is being used here to generate a semi-random strip mall, basically. So this block will consist of random buildings that depend on it's going to pull randomized shops for each location. Plan to add more variants to commercial spaces. Some of them only have one option currently. So here we have an example. It's 6 retail shops, 3 restaurant types, and 4 clothing store types. I haven't looked into exactly how he's doing this, but if it were me, probably just breaking them down into one big chunk and then generating, say, okay, well, we want 3 restaurants, so this is a restaurant generation. This is not a restaurant. This is a closed store generation. This is a restaurant generation, like that. Either way, it adds variety to the game and it pulls things into a more cohesive thing. Oftentimes, the blocks in towns seem very disjointed. We would get houses next to parks, next to forest trails, next to gun shop, and that's a little bit randomized. Usually, cities are separated into blocks and sections. It's the classic Sim City situation where you create zones for residential, commercial, and industrial. And it just, it adds a little bit more of a realistic take on things. And I really do I know it's so silly to say this, but I really like that they have a uniform background with some dumpsters and chain link fences, because that's 99% of the time what exists behind these sort of buildings. And there are many places in Cataclysm that, very simple, you would expect to find a dumpster, and there's no dumpster, and that never made sense to me. And I know it's a silly little thing, but also chain link fences are very valuable for gathering wires and pipes. So there you go. Next time you're on the lookout for trying to make that telescopic crane, check out a block. Next, from Ember, we have adds the SPCS ballistic armor and updates zombie pilot drops. If you remember, we talked about soldier zombie item drops in the last episode, how they had it more standardized, so they carry a standard assortment of loot. They tend to carry more MREs, things like that. Looks like that's essentially what they're trying to do here for the pilot drops as well. But that's not really my takeaway from this. What I want to talk about is this SPCS ballistic armor. This goes hand in hand with another change here, also from Ember, which changes ballistic vests so that they can no longer be repaired, and that they instead have their what are they called? Their inserts are changed. So between these two changes, I found a really big issue with the vests. Them not being reparable kind of makes sense. I mean, it's a vest of woven fibers that you would not really have the ability to repair easily. I don't know how ballistic vests are manufactured, but I know that they're not intended to be repaired. They're intended to be disposable, for the most part anyway. So I kind of like that, but what I don't like is the vest that was added to the game. So we're going to jump in the game and we're going to take a look at it really quick. All right, so we're in the game. This is my current Let's Play, which you can find. Hopefully I put a link up here in the corner. It's called the Fire series. Very exciting. And we found one of these vests, which, yes, I've already taken off because I think that it was just completely overpowered and ridiculous. So let's see if we can find vest. Now here's the vest that we found from a soldier zombie that, is just a little bonkers. So here you'll see it has a bash of 45 and a cut of 81. This is the highest protection I've ever seen in game. I mean, power armor, I guess, is also very high, but this is a vest that you find. I mean, we found it on the first soldier zombie we killed, so presumably it's a pretty standardized ballistic vest material. And this is ridiculous, and I believe this is after a change nerfed their values, because what I saw was that this was added in a PR, nobody cared. Somebody added a PR and said, hey, these values are a little ridiculous, they need to be nerfed, and then everybody had something to say about that. And I wanted to point this out for a couple reasons. One, I think that whoever added this, which I guess would be Ember, so I'm not trying to disrespect you, so don't take it that way, but this to me strikes me as someone who made a vest, said, I'll just arbitrarily plug in some numbers because I don't know the exact, what this converts to in Cataclysm, and I don't really have time to balance it. So I'm just going to add it, we'll balance it later, whatever. Which is mostly fine, that happens kind of a lot. But these numbers are so far and away from what I expected. And if we can look at a Kevlar vest by comparison, Kevlar has a bash of 6 and a cut of 12. Now, admittedly, this ballistic vest is intended to be better than that, but these numbers are 4 to 8 times, bigger than that, and it's a little bit silly how overpowered this was. We wore it briefly in my Let's Play before I kind of said, this is ridiculous. It's too OP. I don't want to wear this. So that's problem number one that I have. I get it. You add stuff to the game and you expect to balance it later. Problem number two is that when someone attempted to balance it into more reasonable values for existing items in Cataclysm, there was pushback on that. And it is indicative to me. So I go on the Discord, right? People often, and you know who you are. If you're listening to this, then you'll know if this is you. But people use these OP items, and they really have this this is the best thing I can use in the game, so I'm going to use it all the time. And then when something changes and they get balanced, because they're obviously overpowered, people freak out. And we saw this with the EMP bombs, which we talked about. Sim changed a couple weeks ago the recipe for EMP grenades so that they're no longer EMP grenades, they're EMP bombs, made them harder to make, made them harder to find, things like that. And the initial reaction I saw to that was just person after person on Discord was, oh God, well now the lab finale is impossible. Who did this? Why would you do this? And it's one, you're overreacting. It's not impossible. I've never used EMP grenades. I've left the lab multiple times. So it's just silly to have that overreaction. But also, it was very clearly overpowered and needed to be nerfed. And I saw that to a lesser extent about these vests. They've been in the game for less than 2 weeks, and people immediately clung to them and was like, this is OP, I need to have this. How dare you try to take that away from me? And I think that that's ludicrous. If you're watching this and you're a fan of Cataclysm, you need to understand that items in the game are balanced around one another. Maybe armor does need to be rebalanced as a whole, but throwing in an item that has 4 or 8 times as much protection, and it's not power armor, and it drops reliably from these enemies, that's breaking the game, and we need to balance that. And so it's not quite the same thing. Obviously, like I said, the EMP bomb thing was much more to the extreme. And I think that's mostly only because this wasn't in the game for very long. But I see this over and over and over anytime something like this happens. And I just wanted to call it out a little bit because I think it's silly. They're trying to balance the game around, if I go today and add a new item, it needs to be balanced around other items in the game. Like if I make a food item that's super duper nutritious and has 10,000 calories in it, it kind of needs to get balanced because it would just break the game balance, right? It doesn't make sense within the confines compared to the other food items. So I just wanted to call that out a little bit because I've seen some negative reactions to this, and it just blows my mind that people even want to use things like this where it's just obscenely powerful, and you're like, what's the point of playing Cataclysm if you pick up one item from the first enemy you kill and you're impervious for the rest of your gameplay, So yeah, I still think this needs nerfed. I believe these are post-nerf values because I did also see a PR that was supposed to change their protection values. But I thought it was really silly how many people had a just ridiculous reaction to this. It never surprises me how often that happens. That's not true. It does surprise me. Stop being like that. You know, it irks me. But anyway, that's a rant. We should probably be moving on. Anyway, you can find these vests. I'm not even sure if that's the exact vest that was referenced in the PR, but it is an example of a broken vest that has been added to the game. So, yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. Again, sorry if that was a rant. It's just hard for me to focus on any other aspect of the PRs when that's like the only thing that stood out to me was how overpowered they are. Next, also from Ember, we have the obsolete Chicken Bot, Tribot, and Tank Bot. Now, if you played Cataclysm for any length of time, you probably come across a Chicken Bot here or there, and they probably ruined your day. These are just sci-fi robots. There's been a movement, you know, people talking about this kind of stuff for a long time. A while back, they removed Zombie Grenadiers because they didn't really fit with Cataclysm. They were they were a lot overpowered. And they were, you know, frustrating, and they didn't really fit with the lore that they were trying to work, and that's kind of where this is at as well. They're sci-fi robots. Like, there is no chicken walker. There's no real life equivalent of the giant chicken walker from Star Wars. Like, that's just not a thing that exists. And so the general idea here, yeah, and here they specifically say, like, the alternative would be to give them a more realistic I can't think of what UGV. I'm pretty sure V is vehicle, so that's something. Unmanned ground vehicle, possibly, to replace them. And we've been seeing some of those make their way into the game. Well, we have some. Regardless, they would be qualified as UG. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, it doesn't fit with the game. One's a reference to Star Wars. I'm not sure. What's the Tripods War of the Worlds? Tank drone just isn't a thing, I don't think. So they've been migrated, and what this means is that, they've been obsoleted. What this means is that they'll still show up in your game if they already existed, but they won't be fully removed from the game, and that's to prevent breaking your save games, things like that. But they won't spawn anymore. They've been removed from monster groups and also from the C++ code, I believe, where they were called from C++ as well. And so this should have just removed them, and you shouldn't have to worry about them as much as you used to. They were pretty rare for the large, you know, for the most part. But when you came across them, you sure knew that you came across them. I'm a fan of this change. I felt for a long time that the robots in the game instant delete you. So, like, if you were a newer player, like I remember... I mean, this was before the evolution changes and some of that stuff. I remember walking out of the evac shelter on day one, getting laser painted and exploded for 2,000 damage or something like that. And that's real frustrating when you're a new player. So I've never been a fan of the robots in game. Even a late game character, if you don't pay attention and you're driving or whatever. That's how we lost. I think it was our Apartment Rat series. We came around a corner. Found a beagle laser painted us, didn't really have time to react, I didn't know what to do, and then I blew up, and that was the end of my 50-hour game, you know. So I'm not a huge fan of them currently. I am curious to see how they come back, you know, what sort of condition they come back in, how they're balanced, things like that. I think that it's kind of a big project to really balance them to where, yes, a robot would absolutely decimate you if it were a tank, but at the same time, we're trying to balance that without huge feels bad moments and the feeling that your character just got erased and there was nothing you could do about it. Especially if you're not if you're an experienced player, you can usually handle them. But I do worry about how new players feel about the robots. So I don't know. It's an interesting change. It's a bold change because I really thought, and there was a lot of negative reaction to it. But ultimately, I do think this is a good change, and replacing them with more like actual, like, you know, drone type technology that's actually comparable to real world devices would be much more interesting to me. But I guess we'll have to see how that shakes out. And here, just so you can see and know what those three robots look like, that would be the tripod, the chicken walker, and the Beagle tank. As far as I know, it's the Beagle tank. That's the only tank drone I'm familiar with. So I gotta assume that's what it is. And again, pretty uncommon. You would see them sometimes at roadblocks, things like that. The Beagle is by far the one I have seen the most in the game. I don't believe I've ever seen a tripod in all the time that I've been playing. But yes, they've been obsoleted, which is fine by me. And then finally, also from Ember, we've got an update to the military surplus. This has been a pretty recent change as well that we haven't really noticed in game. Basically, it's just updating military surplus to have more loot. And because lately we've seen a real influx in loot in the game, you're going to find quite a bit of stuff there until they make the nerfs where it's simulating looting and all that stuff. There are additional loot tables and things like that. You shouldn't, as far as I know, you should no longer be finding power armor in military surplus stores. I don't know if I ever mentioned that, but I do believe that changed. That might have been a while ago. That might have been this change. Recently found power. It was removed. Okay. I mean, yeah, definitely. Of course, we're still going to check out military surplus stores because they have a lot of army gear and MREs and things like that. But they've been updated pretty recently, so they've got a little bit of a facelift, and they're probably a little bit more high value than they used to be. Although, again, I don't think you'll be finding power armor there. And that's really going to wrap up the episode for today. Sorry there was not more to talk about. Nothing really grabbed my attention. And like I said, I have some other things going on. So, yeah, that's the show. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode. I, of course, will be back with more Cataclysm-type content every single day of the week and experimental Cataclysms once every other week or so. Remember to check the channel, stay excited, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode.